In this tutorial, I want to cover just enough Maven terminology to get us started with a practical session. But before I start that, I just want to take you over to the Maven website. So fire up a browser and go to maven.apache.org. Then on the right hand side of the screen there's a Google search. This is really useful if there's ever a piece of terminology you're not sure about, just to go to this custom search and type the phrase in or a keyword in, and that will search the whole Maven website for you. So I've got a query, for example, on the compiler plugin. So if I just type in the word compile, it's still in there from my rehearsal earlier, so I just select that and search. And the search brings up a whole selection of pages. And I'm interested in the compiler plugin in this example, so just click on that. What I'm trying to get across here is that the Maven website is a really useful resource. It's there to be used and it can be a real benefit to you. So if there's any terminology you're not sure about, it's worth having a quick look at the Maven website and fire it into the Google search facility there. So you now have Maven installed, but what exactly does that mean? Well, Maven is really just a core framework for a collection of components or plugins. Now those plugins weren't installed on your machine when you installed Maven, so what Maven will do the first time you run a build is connect across to the internet to Maven Central, and it will download a whole bunch of plugins. And it's those plugins that do the work, that actually do the build work for you. And it's those downloaded plugins that are held in your local repository. So the first time we fire up a build, if you see a lot of activity going on, you only generally see that happen once, the first time you've installed, and it's going to build up the local repository. Okay, so the first term we're going to come across is the term archetype. So if we're not sure what that is, we'll go and use our Google search. Type in the word archetype, or archetypes. Introduction to archetypes, there we go. But basically what an archetype is a template. Now Maven comes with a couple of hundred of these now, and what they provide are a convenient way for us to generate a new project. As you can see, the number of archetypes vary greatly. You've got a J2EE application here, but the one we're interested in is the quick start. And what that does, it basically builds a very simple Java application. I think it just prints hello world to the console. But what it gives you is the basic default Maven structure and also a default POM. So what we'll do in our first practical is to use that archetype to create our first Maven project. Before we move on to the practical, there's one other term I'd just like to introduce, and that's the term of snapshot. A snapshot is a Maven term, and when Maven builds a file, whether it's a jar file or a WAR file, you'll find the name snapshot in the file name. I won't go into too much detail about how a snapshot and the life cycle of a snapshot right now, because I'll talk about that later. But for now, it just indicates that jar or WAR file as a development copy. In other words, it's subject to a lot of change and will change quite frequently during the development process. So that covers everything we need to know just to create our first Maven project in our next practical. And in the next tutorial, that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll be using the quick start archetype, and we'll be running that from the command line to create our first Maven project. And then after that, we'll look at importing that into our Eclipse environment